the Spurs foul. Should Miami go for the three right away? Just attack the basket. James catches, puts up a three. Won't go. Rebound Bosh. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining.
Welcome to the Ultimate Super Coach and Fantasy Sports Show. You are now listening to the Insight Fantasy Sports Podcast.
Boom shakalaka!
G'day everyone, this is at NBA GWiz, and joining me is a tale of two Matties this evening. My friend Matty Malley, how you doing, mate?
Very good, GWiz. How are you?
Mate, I'm absolutely divine looking at that glorious mustache of yours and that deep cut San Antonio Spurs tee you're rocking, but it's a little bit of this and a little bit of this. Oh, you handsome devil. We're here to talk about things all so saucy like that. I'll get my radio. We're here to talk a little bit of sauce and jazz. Utah style. Mate, you were excited to jump on this pod about them. Bit of smooth, mountain, salty jazz. You were excited to talk about the Utah Jazz this season, not because they're going to set the NBA world on fire necessarily, like they did to start the 22-23 season, but why are you high on Utah this season, mate?
Yeah, I think just similar to the other pods I've done for Insight, looking at the Spurs, looking at Brooklyn, and looking at the Wizards, I feel like the Utah Jazz have a similar flavour. They're a team that probably won't get a lot of airtime, but in a fantasy lens, they're going to be very exciting. They're a team that we need to think about and talk about.
They really are, and I think that's put under the lens of their incredible start to last season. Like, this is a team that was hot off the gates, the best team in the NBA. Now, I know that seems like such a hyperbole, but their record indicated that the Utah Jazz were the most competent, well-executed basketball team in the NBA after 10 games. Like, they were clearly blowing everyone away. Everyone was super high on them, obviously spearheaded by one Lauri Markkanen. And I'm going to ask you the question straight off, Malley. Is he in for a repeat success of the shining 22-23 season that we saw from Lauri last season?
Yeah, he kind of came down to earth a little bit in the latter part of the season. So I think we need to temper our expectations a little bit. But yeah, I guess it just goes to show nobody expected anything from Utah, and they came out and performed. So, I mean, it probably makes you think what other NBA teams are in a similar position this year. But I think there's still plenty of excitement around the Utah Jazz, as I said before, from a fantasy lens. So, yeah, that's why we're here to talk about them today.
100%, mate. Now, talking about their ins and their outs, I guess one of the other guys he's right at the top of your list, and you've done a great job laying out the old PowerPoint for those watching on the YouTube. But you've thrown this out there with John Collins, obviously at the top of your ins list. Talk us through the ins and the outs for the Jazz this season, mate.
Yeah, John is obviously the exciting one. Feels weird calling him John. John Collins is obviously the exciting one. Omar Yurtseven's another big boy. The Heat had big plans for him, or at least the Heat supporters had big plans for him. He's now become part of the Jazz, and I think he'll be a welcome addition there. We've got Joey Hauser on a two-way. With the 9th pick, we've got Taylor Hendricks. The 16th pick, we have Keyonte George, a guy that you like a little bit of his flavour. We've got at the 28th pick, their third first-round draft pick was Bryce Sensabaugh. Then we got Tavian Kinsley, Romeo Langford, a friend of mine from the Spurs, and Nick Ongenda, which is all three of those guys, Kinsey, Langford, and Ongenda, on Exhibit 10 contracts. And then leaving on the other side in the revolving door is Vernon Carey Jr., Rudy Gay, the 37-year-old. I don't know what he's got left in the tank, but that doesn't matter to the Utah Jazz. He's off now. Frank Jackson, Damian Jones, and Juan Toscano Anderson, who last I read wasn't doing much besides trying out for a position with the Golden State Warriors. I don't know if he got it or not.
But meaningful fantasy, of all of these ins and outs, the only person there no, I'm not going to say the only person. That's a little bit crap and a little bit not sleeper savvy of me. The two big people are probably John Collins and Keyonte George. Taylor Hendricks, somewhat. We'll talk about that later on. I know you're interested. You're keen to talk about Taylor Hendricks and what he can do with these organizations. But those are really the three of all these movers or shakers. Why is Taylor Hendricks for you? You're a little bit, what have you got in there for me?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I can't see exactly what Utah seen him, but for a ninth a pick in the first round, there's got to be something that they see that we don't. So we'll have a talk about him later and see if we can try and get on the same page as the Utah Jazz. But I agree. I think Keyonte George is the one to watch from this list, and I also think he has the clearest path for minutes. So from a fantasy perspective, he's probably the one that we need to pay some attention to.
Now, you've put this together for us. Talk me through. We've been doing this exercise on these Inside Team season pods where what we do is we look at the season and we look at basically who's going to be up, down, or sideways from where they were last year. And some of them is equal signs, which like, oh, they're going to return the same value as last year. Like they were basically like 20th last year. They'll be like 19th, 18th, up to 22. Like we give a room of 2 or 3 rankings to be about equal. Plus values is over that. Undervalue is under that. You've gone pluses, minuses, and a couple of the like maybe about the same, but it's too early to tell. So talk us through your list, Malley.
Yeah, I might be a little optimistic with John Sexton. John Sexton. Jeez, I'm throwing John in there everywhere now. Colin Sexton getting a plus on his scorecard here. I think if, in one lens, he probably can't do worse than he did last year, but another lens, we know only 4 years ago now, 3-4 years ago, he was in a position where he was an exciting player. And he's got opportunity on this team. He looks like he's going to be the starting point guard. He's come out and said that he wants to get back to where he was. He wants to be a starting point guard. But that's kind of just NBA speak for no one's had a conversation about me in a while. And I've got to say something positive about myself. So, but you look, there's positives there. Like the field goal percentage is pretty admirable. At 507, and then we got 819. Can't even say my numbers properly as a free throw percentage. The real worry with him is going to be whether he can pass the ball. That 2.9 assists is a bit sad to look at, isn't it, for a starting point guard in the NBA?
Yeah, it makes me really, really sad. I mean, you look at this point guard. Let's talk point guards for a second. Let's talk at our elite point guards. Let's talk our point guards who like Tyrese Halliburton and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You know, these first round guys, this Steph Curry, like even our late round guys like D'Angelo Russell. It's double the point. It's double the assists a game. And I mean, maybe their percentages aren't as good as his from the like. He did have a better like showing from the floor. But what also concerns me for my point guard is that his plays in isolation and he's off the dribble he's lessened that a lot. It's like a lot more getting to the cup. Like he's taking smarter shots, but it's only resulting in 1 3-point a game. And to be fair, I want my point guard putting down at least 2 plus a clip. Like if you're shooting as a point guard or any kind of guard in the NBA, only 1 3-pointers a game, it's not the way, considering that you look down the rest of the Jazz roster and Lauri Markkanen, your power forward, small 5 occasionally last terms for points in the is knocking down 3. He's doing it every way. So for me, that's always been my concern with Sexton. His real flair for outside shooting.
And we're going to take a deeper dive into him later, but I think where you're going to be picking him up on the north side of pick 100. I know when I get to that stage, I'm trying to really scrounge out of point guards the ability to get some assists, and 2.9 really isn't cutting it. I'm going to give you some statistics about where his assists land in a couple of slides' time. So we might move on from him. How about Jordan Clarkson, the
Love
Filipino superstar, holding the team together?
Look, I love Jordan Clarkson in NBA fantasy for one reason. I will obviously draft him. I shouldn't say I love him. How's this? I find what he can do admirable for where he goes. Because if you are drafting him at 125 and you are getting 21 points a game in the hundreds, you are getting points, and you need to factor that into your builds. Because if he's knocking down 2 3-pointers a game, he's getting you 20 points a game, and you think he's going to be a bit less value here. So let's say he goes down to 19 points a game, 18 points a game this season, still in the 120s, because he is going in similar spots. His ADP value is around 130 so far. I've seen him bump up to a couple in like the 110s, but I've also seen him go like in the 140s, like late 140s in drafts, like the last round. Like people are like, oh, Jordan Clarkson's there. I've seen people jump on him early, stupidly at like 90, thinking that he's going to be just, oh, I need points. So they plug and play. You can tell in a draft who's definitely trying to milk the points category if they jump like 3-4 rounds early for Jordan Clarkson. But if you've been savvy enough to factor in your field goal percentage, which isn't great at around 440, you're going to factor that in. But he gets you 4 assists a game. He gets you 4 rebounds a game. He's not going to conversely do anything by way of defense for you. We're also talking about a team that had the 23rd ranked defense at 116 points per game last season of 30 teams. So we're the bottom third of the NBA. So you're not getting a lot of steals, one would say, out of the Utah Jazz organization as a whole. But I really like what he can do late for those points and keeping and buoying my free throw percentage and for chipping in rebounds and chipping in assists. Even if that comes back down to 3 rebounds a game this season and like 3.5 assists, you are not going to get that kind of play in those fields generally that late in the draft.
No, and the only thing I look along his stat line here, and the only thing that stands out to me as being a potential worry, and maybe the reason that he's getting a negative symbol from me there is that 27% usage. And then I start playing with that in my head, and I think they've got Lauri Markkanen there at 26% usage, so about on par. But then you've got low usage plays around him. So when I'm considering that usage dropping, I don't know where it's going to go. Colin Sexton at 23%, that's probably a high watermark for him. And then you've got John Collins, who isn't a high usage. He was at 17% last year. I mean, that was a bit of a low for him at Atlanta. But Walker Kessler at 13%. I guess he's the guy. Like he and Lauri are the guys taking the shots, and potentially Colin Sexton eats into that a little bit if he can get back into form. But another thing we need to consider with Jordan Clarkson too is the potential that he could, if Colin Sexton can't move into the point guard position as well. We know he can pass. We know he's got a great eye for the game. He can control. He's a floor general. Like he looks around. He knows what he's doing out there. So there's that potential.
Yeah, don't let the dopey
in there too. So I look at that now.
Yeah, don't let the dopey dreadlock haircut fool you. Don't let this dreadlocked cool guy fool you. He's like an NBA veteran now. He just looks like he's like a teenager who should be in a rap video. Like, that's the only like bad watermark for Jordan Clarkson.
He's got a head like a neglected Barbie doll, but besides that, we're not here to do fashion takes. But yeah, obviously he's a valuable fantasy guy. But you're right. I think people probably get too excited about him. They see those 21 points, they go, "Give me now," and they're going to pay more for him than what he's worth. They're going to take him higher than what he's worth. That's what I've seen in draft so far, anyway.
Yeah, that's definitely what I'm seeing in mock draft. So if you're seeing a guy draft Jordan Clarkson in the 80s and 90s, you know they're just really trying to get him points as much as possible and make that really hard for you. But just know that you need to be targeting other areas strongly because they're going to be neglecting that to go for points real deep and hard. The big man in town, Mr. Utah himself, Lauri Markkanen, arrived last season to a triumphant season, one would say. Everyone's favorite for most improved player, breakout star of the year. They really just shone a spotlight on the Jazz organization from day dot. And he's the Finnish military service man. He's the polished product of a quality NBA human being. You know what I mean? Like he's returned this season to Utah. You've said it going either way. Is that because of the arrival of pretty much John Collins in that forward spot? So you're not expecting him to yield the same return because there's a bit of a timeshare around the forward position. Is that where you're at? Where are you at?
It definitely plays into the picture. I think as well, we began to see a slowdown in Lauri Markkanen stats. He came back down to earth a little bit, and we saw a little bit more of Cleveland Lauri Markkanen in the latter quarter of last season. He obviously exploded onto the stage. I know personally, I took him in one of my drafts last season, and once I started to see the value, I sold him. At that stage, I thought I was selling high. I thought I better get this guy off, and I got a good return from him. Can't remember who it was, but I was happy with the return I got for Lauri Markkanen, and then he kept on doing the same thing. So I realized he wasn't a flash in the pan. I was happy that I got value for him, but yeah, I don't know. He might be another person who is close to. I know he's still young, but close to seeing his ceiling. Three pointers, I don't think that'll stay. The field goal percentage probably will. I think some of those rebounds might get taken away from him now that we've got a proper starting center in Walker Kessler for a whole season and John Collins, but he's still a 7-foot shooting small forward. Like, he's a mammoth of a man out there, and they're going to be a scary team to line up against, I think, just from that point, at least anyway.
Look, I'm definitely seeing what you're seeing there as well. Look, after the trade deadline, Lauri only played 15 games after the trade deadline. Like, he was injured. I had him in my team and I had to scramble. I mean, I'm lucky I won a couple of leagues last year. I did well. But when he started resting with his injury, that was concerned. But you're right. He did taper off. In fact, hashtag basketball after last season, you see him in there. He was the 18th ranked guy, and he's going about the same, if not earlier, top 15 right now. Like, pretty much you can see the name Lauri Markkanen going off in drafts between 15 and 20, not uncommon. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to, you're not going to be shocked. But he actually returned the 28th value, according to them, after the after the trade deadline last year. And the big taper off for him, as you said, he came back down to earth by way of field goal percentage. It was at 450, so it's dropped like 0.5%, which is quite not 0.5, like 0.05%.
Yeah, that's a good
but
margin.
that's actually seeing. But that's a good margin. Like, it's like, oh, but it's only point. No, it's actually in fantasy. That's a lot. In fact, putting it at 450 actually puts it in the red zone. So when you're talking about the averages, it actually makes it like not efficient. Like, he's dropped down from his really high efficiency down into below a normal shooter at that point in time. So it really was a little bit of a crash back to earth. Obviously, as well, he was the focal point of their offense. So he was taking all the looks and taking all the shots, and defense has kind of got there. He's still putting 2.9 threes a game, 28 points a game, 8 rebounds. But, he doesn't really give you many, steals or blocks or those kind of categories. He turns it over a couple of times a game. But if he just happens to drop into the mid-20s, 25th, 26th, I'll be comfortable taking him there, knowing that that's about where he's going to be. I think he'll return similar value to second half of last season after the trade deadline, Lauri Markkanen this season. So I definitely think he's going to be a down on where he was, his absolute peak ceiling. John Collins, comeback Collins. Let's call him the comeback kid. The comeback Collins tour. You think it's real, yeah?
I'm hoping it is. I mean, I went back and looked at his statistics over the last 4 years, and I watched that peak, and there was a lot of excitement. I still remember it must have been 3 fantasy seasons ago, 3 actual NBA seasons ago, where people were so high.
No, it's just fantasy.
Like, he's this athletic
It's just
dude.
fantasy. Only fantasy is important, Malley. We know that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a game behind it. We don't have to worry about that. It's just a fantasy glimpse. But like he was able to block shots. His percentages were sexy. He could hit threes. He rebounded. He'd get a couple of assists, and then things fell off, and Atlanta seemed to go cold on him. And then it was the name that would come up constantly. This is the year that John Collins gets traded. And I feel like that happened every year for the dude. And yet he had to keep turning up after training camp and play another season. And that must have worn him down a little bit too. So he's got his fresh start here. We'll see what he can do. He's in about as good a position as he's going to get. Let's hope that he can return form. We're going to look at him a little bit later again in a few slides' time. But, yeah, he is someone I'm quietly excited on. And I think he's one of those guys. He's not going to have a worse season than last year in the position he's in. We know what he can do. We're just hoping that we see him get back to that form.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I mean, even if it's like John Collins light from that time, if you can find him at a reasonable, look, he's not going to be one of these bargain basement guys you pick up like, oh my God, I can't believe that John Collins is still sitting there at 110. I don't think he'll go outside the top 100 in many drafts. Like, his ADP is starting to round into that upside, but he is going to be possibly a top 100 player. You can see there at the end of the season that he finished at 114th. And if he can come back in a better situation, which again, is probably situationally, it's very much like the Jaylen Brown thing. Like, oh, he's going to be traded every year. You're going to be traded. Oh, we're going to get KD. Oh, we're going to trade you. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of has got to get into your head after a while. And there's been so much turmoil in Atlanta, like coaching changes, like like infighting, Trey going nuts at people left, right, and center. Like, it just doesn't seem like a good workplace environment. And I think Collins actually felt that the most. Like, he looked to be a super happy dude. And then it just wasn't. Like, it was going to be the Trey and Collins show, and it never eventuated into that. It was always about get another superstar in, get another person in, get someone else to help Trey win. Trey is the winner, ooh, ice cold. And I'm not trying to sound like I'm hating on Trey, but at the same time, like, if you're going to be the leader in a locker room, you got to take the other guys along with you for the ride. And I think he's still sitting on the platform. John Collins is still very much sitting on the platform waiting for his train to come. And it has, and now it's taken him to Utah. So I definitely see we're going to have a return to form here. Last year, one of everybody's favorite hype trains afterwards really, really was Walker Kessler, or I like to call him because he's in Utah, Rudy Gay 2.0. Walker Kessler can buoy your field goal percentage. He can block your shots, and he's going to absolutely fucking sink your free throw percentage left, right, and center. But we like him, and his name is Walker Kessler, and he is the new Rudy Gay in Utah. It's like they just have this thing for, hey, you're big and can block shots. G'day, Mark Eaton. How are you? Oh, g'day, Rudy Gobert. Would you like to come and play basketball?
They've definitely got a prototype that they're working for there, and I think they must have been chuffed after they got rid of an aging Gobert. They've gone and seen that he's kind of fallen back to earth a little in his new position in Minnesota. They must be just grinning from ear to ear with the player that they got back from Walker Kessler. It took me about 3 months to figure out if he was Walker Kessler or Kessler Walker, because he seems like a man with two first names. But once I figured out who he was, and then seeing that shot blocking come through, and that was delectable. I don't know. I think he's going to probably be, if not at least in the top three shot blockers this year. We got to see what he could do last year. His minutes are going to go up this year. He's going to play a full year at center. If you're punting free throws, you're going to be in for a good time. His field goal percentage is very strong. He doesn't. Oh, yeah. He does. Yeah. He doesn't do his best work on the offensive end. That's not the guy he is, but that's not why you're picking him up.
Look, in the top 200 players last year, of all of the players in this, the number one field goal percentage player in NBA fantasy last year after the trade deadline was Walker Kessler when he went on this little comeback tour thing. He was at 736 last year after the trade deadline. He's hitting he's taking only. Like, that's just like massive. Like, the thing is, he does handcuff you. It's not even like it's a passable free throw percentage. After the trade deadline, it was at 454, and as you can see there for the year, it was at 516. So it got worse as the season went on. You generally like to see it kind of climb at the end, like the more games you play. But he also got more opportunities because he was playing more. And that being said, he's only getting 2.6 attempts at the line a game, but he gets you 11 rebounds basically a game at 10.8 after the deadline. But the 3 blocks was just that's just tasty. The thing is, if he can improve his free throws, and if you watch the preseason, and it looks like he's got a new shooting stroke on, and he can improve that to 650. Like, that's a pretty massive jump. But even over 600, at only that amount of games, if you've got a volume free throw shooter that takes a lot of free throws at a really high clip. So I'm talking guys like, who's a good example? Someone like even Kyrie Irving. You know what I mean? He's got a free throw percentage in the 900s. Like him and Bojan Bogdanovic kind of don't miss. Like, they're all up in there like that 900s, 940s, those kind of dudes. But if you can get a guy or a couple of guys in your team on volume to stack in really nicely, you can kind of accept it a little bit, and that can really help your free throw, like help your other areas out. Like guys like Damian Lillard who shoot 900 and even get double that at 10 free throws a game, then you're starting to look real good. Mikal Bridges, he gets like 7, and you can get him in like a couple of rounds. So you start to stack those 900 percentage guys in with him. You're probably gonna get like, basically what it becomes is what I'm trying to say is if you can get to 20 free throws a game and you're going to be hitting like 700 or like 800% of them, well, then you're looking okay, and that makes up for it. But you've got to be really careful if you're looking with that with Walker Kessler.
I think you're going to be able to hide him pretty easily in that regard. You said there he only gets to the line 2.5 times a game. If he's hitting one and missing the other one, that's not really disturbing things too much. I think you're going to be able to recover from that quite well. We're not talking about a Giannis here who's at the line 10, 15 times a game and missing half of them. This is very recoverable. I think you don't have to look into a punt free throw with a man like this. But you're right. I think every shot counts, and if you're really in a position where you can't mask him, maybe you don't pick him up. But as you said there, you put him next to a Kyrie, and that goes from a combined between them, 12 free throws a game, and you're hitting 9 of the 12. That's still a good clip.
Yeah, 100%. Mate, we've got Chris Dunn there. He won't be the same. He can go either way because of his role there. We've already talked about some changes coming up, and I want to get to those. But OG Abaji, you're thinking Ochai Abaji, what do you reckon he's going to be doing this season in this roster? Because he's one of the guys who stayed around. So guys like Ochai Abaji, Taylor Horton Tucker, who has a role there. I think the guy who's going to go down, as you put there with THT, is him and Kelly Olynyk. They're not in for the same minutes or possibly the same role as they had last year.
I mean, he was a 14th pick in last year's draft, so he's only had 1 year out to prove himself. But I think that he's going to do some work this year. In the time he had last year, putting up at only 21 minutes a game, 8 points isn't too sexy, but 1.5 threes, 8-16 as his free throw percentage. Rebounds and assists are a little light on, but there's promise there, and he's going to get an opportunity this year. And I think he's someone that if you're playing in a 20-man league, he's definitely someone who you're going to be able to pick up and get some work from. And if you're in a 12-man league like most of us are, he might be someone that you probably won't take as a flyer. He's too far out. But if he can get some minutes behind him, he might be one of those guys worth keeping an eye on. And when the Jazz have a big week, you might be able to bring him in and he can do some work for you off the waiver.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those guys to watch off the waiver. Like, he did see a few more minutes. He got up to, I believe, like 29 minutes a game after the trade deadline last season. So he's definitely one of those guys. Like, for me, it's Kelly Olynyk, who ended up being like, I love picking him up as an option last year. I just love his all-round game. Like, he's another one of these guys he just reminds me of an old school. Like, you could literally take a picture of him in a throwback Jazz jersey, and I wouldn't know what era the guy was playing on with that headband and long hair. Or is he the lead singer of Whitesnake? I just don't know. But I love what he always does. Like, he's one of these floor stretching big men, and he really does stretch the floor. Like, he can knock down a couple of threes a game. It's usually like 1.5 threes a game. He gets decent percentages. He's got a high free throw clip too. Like, he's 870 for free throws, and he's hitting over 4 of them a game. He gets you rebounds. He's a great passing big man as well. So it's really going to be, it's not a shame to see him fade, but he will be faded this season. But he's definitely going to be, like, if Walker Kessler goes down, I mean, obviously, if Yurtseven gets the minutes, there's going to be a timeshare going on. But Kelly Olynyk is definitely a pick up and plug straight away, because he had that starting role to start. He's still a good basketball player. He is still on this roster, and he could probably be a really good stream target for you over the course of the season, depending on health and injuries. Malley's, I call these Malley's Jazz. This is your starting 5. Look, I want you put this together with you. Tell us about your starting 5 for the Utah Jazz, because I've got one major question for you at the end.
I think if I was a betting man, I'd say the question probably comes around Colin Sexton, but I could be wrong, so I'll let you surprise me.
No, you're spot on. We'll get to that at the end.
We've really done it. All I've got here is that we've got Colin Sexton coming out saying that he's going to put in work to get back to being a starting point guard. In this next slide, where we do a deep dive into him, we'll see that it wasn't all too long ago where he's nearly averaging 5 assists in a shooting guard role. So it's there in him somewhere. I look at this list as well and think, is the John Collins from a couple of seasons ago going to rear his head? I think this might be a bit of a comeback tour for Collins, Sexton, and John Collins. Anyone who's got Collins in their name in this team's going to hopefully have an improved season. I worry a little bit with anyone trying to take Walker Kessler in that anywhere inside the top, maybe 35. I've seen him go really high. I know that people think they've got to snavel blocks early and try and monopolize the blocks category, but it's such a volatile category. If he drops, 0.4 blocks, that's going to all his values really tied to his blocks. So I have little concerns about him there. I also look at this and go, how far off his ceiling is Lauri Markkanen? I guess we'll have another season to answer that question. And the last thing I put there was just how lucky are the Philippines to have Jordan Clarkson. He really dominated in his time at FIBA before they took leave.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah,
he really did.
Yeah.
I think you're spot on with Lauri. My point about that is I don't think that Lauri Markkanen, oh God, am I going to be aggregated on this? I don't think Lauri Markkanen is a full-time top 20 NBA player. I think he's a top 25, 30 player based on what he's shown last season. But then again, we've got these other samples of him playing in Cleveland where he played his role, these other samples in the Bulls. I mean, this was Lauri unleashed last year. And he came out of the blocks and he fucking cooked. I had him everywhere. I knew, when you get those players and you just know you want to hold on to them for dear life. My guys last season going into a draft where it's like, I've got to leave this draft with this guy and this guy, which also, I say this, but I'm also the guy to say, please don't do that in your own drafts. I just do it personally because I find it hard to let go. And Malley, you might be the same. Like we'll do all this research and look at this and we'll put our analyst hat on and we'll try and do all this stuff. And I'm like, but if you're new at this, especially, and you're like, I've got to get this guy. I'm so high on him. I'm so high on Lauri. I've got to get Lauri. Just don't put your stock and trade in those dudes like that. Like I had targets who I knew I could get, and I actually probably drafted a couple of them around early, thinking that they could go to 2 or 3 rounds more value improved. And I picked up Lauri last year in one draft in the 70s. And there you are at the end of the day. I was happy to jump on him right there and then, knowing that I could probably get him a top 40 value. But I think he's got his ceiling there. I don't think we're going to see the same elite Lauri every season forever. He was basically like a almost Kevin Durant-ish in his mid-range, like in what he was doing. Like we're talking these big, long 7-foot archetypes, mate. I think that was it. Am I too high? Am I too definitive in that? I just think that's it. That's our best version of Lauri. Like in all of the worlds, that's it.
I think we can be a little dismissive of him. I don't want to go as far to say it was a flash in the pan, but if I had to have a spicy take, that might be it. I think you're right. Do as we say, not as we do, because you and I are probably both self-victims of going, got to walk away with this guy, and it paid off with Lauri Markkanen. But I don't like my chances of that happening every year. So I think I'll just put that one in the came down to luck category. But I look at this team. My final kind of take, if you don't have to be an NBA analyst to look at this team and understand the difference between green and red and how dismal is that steals column looking. This team gets about 2 combined steals a game. That's yuck. And assists is also pretty gross. Like there's it's very grim.
And look, this is what we're talking about as well. They had their points per game. They were 7th on offense last season at 117 points a game. Opposition points per game was very close. It's very close though. They would score 117, but they would let their opponents score 118. It's like 1 point difference between the two. Their offensive rating was pretty bloody great at 115. They were the 10th, so they made the top 10. It's pretty good for this team. Net rating, though, overall was 22nd of the team. And look, this is a guy as well Will Hardy is a decent coach. Like Will Hardy is a very good NBA coach. So he was obviously pilfered over there. He was pilfered over there into the organization from the Boston Celtics as one of their assistants in that whole shape out. And the Celtics really kind of wanted him as their guy. But he was like, no, I'm I'm going to go to the mountains and just live in Utah and get the run of that organization. And they're acquiring really good young talent to couple up there. As you said, the comeback tour, Walker Kessler, and also, as you said, you're really on this one because I'm of the opinion, I'll go back to it because I want to talk about Colin Sexton. I think let's talk about Colin at the same time. I want to know, can Keyonte George be the starting point guard? Because I think Keyonte George could snare the role and Colin Sexton plays the good soldier, serviceable backup offensive cook. We saw his high usage earlier on and we spoke about it, that it was 27 usage. Where are you going to get this guy to do work to show that he is a good quality NBA player again? He could probably eat second units. I won't say alive, but he could be really good. But look at those assists, mate. He's one spot before Yusuf Nurkic and behind Aaron Gordon for a point guard. Like, I'm just not buying it. Like, as you said, his best shooting guard, his best season was playing as shooting guard in that Sexland era of 4 assists a game. But is this a guy now who just needs to play his role as a scorer? Or do you think he can be Colin Sexton, the facilitator? Because I would argue almost that Keyonte George could step in and be better at both straight away.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see Keyonte on opening night, but I think as the season goes on, he's the person I think might end up in the point guard role. I think Colin Sexton would be best as a 6-man where he can go out, he can shoot the lights out, he can be electric in the minutes he's got on the court, and then they can sit him back on the bench until they need him again. It seems so long ago since the Sexton era. I don't know if that was ever an era, if it was just a fun thing to say, and that's why it sticks in people's heads. But yeah, I think his career, he's had his peak. I know he's had his injuries, but I just can't see him. He's not going to be a long-lived and well-remembered player in the NBA, I don't think. And, they've got Horton Tucker, they've got George, they've got Dunn, they've got Clarkson, they've got people who can play the point if he doesn't step up and do the job properly. I'm just also stuck on you talking about Will Hardy before, and I don't know if you can be racist against your own people, but this might sound racist. Whenever I think of Babushka dolls, I think of Will Hardy being the smaller version of Walker Kessler. Like, it's almost like you open up Walker Kessler and you've got Will Hardy inside, but that might be my white person racist on white person take. Yeah, there you go. Where's your hot,
it's pretty accurate. Wait, where's my hot? But you want me to hot on that one? I can do a couple of sound takes. Where's the hot take?
For that?
You want a hot for that?
Just kidding me.
You have to do that one. Yeah, there's your hot take in this podcast, ladies and gentlemen. That Will Hardy is actually as Walker Kessler. Take that one away for you. No, look, you put it down there. Like, they've got the whole Ben Simmons experience. I call it the Ben Simmons experience. Your whole big guy who can handle the ball in the point guard role. THT actually plays that Ben Simmons facilitator role pretty well. And I'm just making that deep cut to Simo because it's pretty much when he started playing that role, a lot more attention got put onto those Magic Johnson-esque larger point guards. And Taylor Horton Tucker has played that role, like that whole point Horton Tucker experience. So they're not afraid to mix it up in Utah with like the distributor ball. They're also a very they don't pass. Like, this is the weird thing. They pass a lot, but they pass a lot isolation. Like, as you can see by the drop-off of assists in a game, the ball's not always frequently moving. They'll pass around. Okay, you'll have the ball for 10 seconds, and you'll get that assist taken away from my stat sheet. Colin Sexton, as you said, with 27% usage was right up there. 20%. 27% was Jordan Clarkson, because Jordan Clarkson also runs some of the second unit. And so when you get that, if Colin Sexton takes that role up, and you were talking about usage this season, I see Colin Sexton becoming the new Jordan Clarkson in a way, and therefore he gets to run that second unit a lot more, and he'll see his percentage and his usage really come up in that unit here. The first round draft picks are a little tantalizing later in the season because I absolutely love Keyonte George. Like, before, as you said, pinging his ankle, over 6 games, his averages were 18.7 points, 5 assists, 3.7 rebounds, 1.3 steals. And yes, I know, Maddie, it was summer league, but the guy cared, and he actually wanted to put on a show and be grateful that he could play basketball. Like, he wanted to go out there and show he's one of these dudes like, oh, he's got a motor, he's a hooper. Yeah, no, he's just a guy who wants to play basketball and play it really, really well because he knows that that's his career. And I think I get that more from Keyonte than Taylor Hendricks and Senzabar. And I think Keyonte is going to be the one to watch. And surprise, surprise, Keyonte George is actually not going in a lot of drafts right now. Maddie, do you think that's an oversight of punters right now?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, this is just a testament to the future of the Utah Jazz franchise, isn't it? You know, it's a youth movement. They got picks to come, and they took 3 first-round draft picks this year. But I agree. If I had to shake my magic 8 ball and pull a name out of these 3 of who's going to have the brightest future in the next few years, I feel like it is Keyonte George. And in this team, as I say there, I think he's got the best pathway to minutes and early minutes. He looked.
Yep.
I know he was playing against other first, second, third years, people trying to get a placing on a team in the NBA and summer league, but he kind of looked.
Yep.
He looks NBA ready, you know, like he looked hungry.
He did. He really looked hungry, whereas guys are out there just like playing like, I've got my contract. I'm a rookie. I'm in the league. I'm here to play. He came to play and almost to prove that he should have been the first pick ahead of Taylor Hendricks. You know what I mean? Like he just plays with a little bit of a chip. And as a 6'4" nuggety kind of guy, I like it. I like that motor that he's got in there. Hendricks and obviously Senzabar we didn't see them on their full display. I am interested in Taylor Hendricks, especially in that whole breakout after the trade deadline kind of thing. Because we know Utah last year played it very safe with Lauri Markkanen. And if they're going nowhere quickly, as you said, they've got draft picks to come and they could get another draft pick in this one in that top 10. And then you start to put a team and you land one free agency because they're going to have some cap room coming up. And all of a sudden, the Utah Jazz are very close to being back to the organization they were. Now, we're talking about the organization that had Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, and Mike Conley running around and leading them and doing really well. Like they were like Western Conference finalists. We are probably not this season, maybe not next season. We're only just a couple of seasons away, though, from these guys being a contender in the Western Conference if they can keep a good young core together. And they're drafting really well, as you said. You really like what's in the future for the Utah Jazz, don't you, Matty?
Yeah, and I mean, if you're in a keeper league, there's some names to pay attention to. So, let's just see what they can do. Hopefully, they get an opportunity. They're obviously in a position in Utah where they probably aren't going to be pushing for much of a finals run. Hopefully some of those young guys get a run out there. We know that there's a couple of injury risks out there, so those young boys might get a run. They're only 19, group of them, so they're basically kids. We'll see what they can do.
Talking about someone who's not a kid, he's a grown man right now. He's one of the veterans of the team. John Collins, talk us through your you put down the big season last season. You left me with a task to what you think my predictions would be for this season. So I filled it in for you, Malley. What do you think of my prediction? I'll talk through you have a look at my predictions. I'll talk through what his big season was. He's 19-21. Well, you look at what I've thrown in there. Minutes was 33 a game. Usage was 23%, 21 points a game, 1.4 threes, 583 field goal, 800 free throw, who's from a sub 800 shooter pretty much his career. He's on 803. He's around 800, 880. 10 rebounds a game, 1.5 assists, 0.8 steals, 1.6 blocks, which was the really big thing that we saw on Collins that season with 1.8 turnovers. We've seen a lot more of the usage, initiating plays and working as a creator as well. Last season, again, removed from that 21-22 and season, which was a bit of a write-off for the Hawks, even though they made it to the playoffs and everyone was high on them. Last season, again, the same trade talk continued, as you said earlier. And he's all the way down to 17% usage, playing 30 minutes a night, only 13 points a game, 1 3, 500 from the field, 800 from the line. Those are very respectable percentages, but his rebounds are now at 6. You know, obviously that whole Capella holding that middle down and just being a rebounding guru really kind of handicaps that for him. Assists 1.2, steals 0.6, and only 1 block a game. Not only 1 block, it's still a block at the end of the day. Read us through my predictions for 23-24, and do you think that I'm ballpark okay there or not?
I'm just looking back at his big season, his 1920 season. You can get a real sense of why people were ready to give him a reach around, like, and do
Yeah.
terrible things to try and get him in their second round. Like, those are some
Mm-hmm.
delicious numbers. If you're going to make a player up that really doesn't have any deficiencies and does things across the board, that's it. I'm looking at your
Yeah.
numbers here. So you've made a prediction of 30 minutes, which sounds about fair. You've got him going up a couple of percentage to 19%. I think with Kessler also not at a high percentage, I think he'll probably stay around the 14, 15 mark. So I think at 19%, that's reasonable, maybe even on the lower side. That might be playing that a bit safe there.
Yeah.
15
Yeah.
points a game feels good. 1.5 threes, I like that. 512 as a field goal percentage and 780 for a free throw seems pretty fine. The 6 to 7 rebounds might
Yeah.
not be accurate. Potentially, if he's going to have to spend more time outside the arc, I think that might be a job best left to Walker Kessler. But I think 6 is definitely not out of the realm of realism.
Yeah,
1.5
I'm playing with
assists, I
that's why I said
like.
6 or 7.
0.7
I
steals.
was not convinced. You've hit a good point there. Can we talk through that? I'm really curious to see his rebounds. We know Walker Kessler is an elite rim protector. If they move some small ball lineups, let's say they roll out a lineup where Collins plays the middle, power forward is Lauri Markkanen, and they bring in young bloke like Taylor Hendricks at the small forward spot. Young elite, Jordan Clarkson is your shooting guard, and Keyonte George is a point guard for a small ball lineup. That's where I really think Collins can come alive and really up that rebound count. And also that's then tied to his blocks increasing as you're about to read out. Do you see we get much of that, or do you reckon they're going to be very much anchored to a big traditional anchor, a big middleman there in Utah?
No, I'd like to see him play some more 5 this season, and maybe and play the backup 5 minutes. I know that'll obviously affect Kelly Olynyk, who must be about, when you were talking about him before, I was thinking about him being Canada personified. He's just quiet, gets his job done, has a smile on his face. He's not showy. He seems very humble.
Okay. Yeah, 100%.
It's giving me South Park vibes for sure. But yeah, I think I know he's potentially lined up next to one of the league's premier shot blockers, but I feel like the only thing I think you've undersold him on this year is maybe his blocks. I think there's room for him to move back up close to the 1.4 mark, as opposed to going down like 0.2 of a percent. So sorry, of a block. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And I mean, at the end of the day, I know this is probably outside the realms of fantasy, but from an NBA perspective, they basically traded him for a 37-year-old veteran and a bag of tater chips. So, they didn't have to give up much to get him. Yeah.
That just shows you how desperate Atlanta was to actually just clear him off the books. That shows you how absolutely desperate Utah was to be like, one, give us more talent, but how absolutely desperate Atlanta was to be like, just we're done with the whole John Collins experiment. He's out of here. And then they've given him away for Rudy Gay. Like that's pretty bloody shocking. Like that is, if he comes even half alive to part of that, it's going to be one of the steals of the offseason, 100 million%.
And I haven't seen him move up the draft board very quickly. I think people get a little excited too when players move teams and they think they're going to be this totally new player. This is still John Collins. He's just wearing a different jersey. And yeah, he might have some opportunities that he didn't have last season. But I think I was going to say temper your expectations, but I think from what I've seen in the mock drafts, people's expectations are pretty bang on. So yeah, I'd say if you're taking him around that probably 100, 110 mark, it's all upside. Like you're stoked if you can get him there. But I think realistically, he's probably going to go close to maybe 90.
Yeah, I think if you're in a very competitive league, people will look at that upside straight away and try and grab onto that and try and even get a return, at least a round or two value, and hoping that he's going to return in 70s, late 60s round value. So people will be very happy to snare him in the 80s. If you see him hovering around the 100s, it's definitely a take, especially if you're looking for like a power forward position. And if he has that dual eligibility in the center role, yeah, it's just going to serve you in both ways in those leagues. Predictions for the Utah Jazz this season. Last year, they were 37-45. They were expected last year to be 39-43. So always look at the expected lines from the year before and then what they did, and they fell under that. They're expected this year to be even worse, but they've upgraded. And this is a really odd under and over at Sportsbet that I found, because I believe that they've upgraded by way of John Collins, by bringing in Keyonte George, by bringing in Taylor Hendricks. I believe they've just gotten better as a general basketball team. If they're at full health with Lauri, 35.5, I think I might take over and see a similar 36 games, 37 games, 38 games, but I don't think 35. What about you, mate? I'm going to go overs on this one. You?
Yeah. Well, they got off to a wildly hot start last year, and then the whole team, the organization kind of came back down to earth. I'm the same as you. I'm a man who follows numbers, and I try and let that lead the way, and then fill in the gaps with my own understandings and predictions. But even though I think on paper they've got better, I'm actually going to play devil's advocate here quite happily, and I'm going to go under. I reckon, yeah. We might have to put a little sexy wager on that, you and I, because I don't think we're going to disagree on too many. But yeah, I'm 35.5 seems low, but I'm going under. Why not? Let's do it.
You're going to go, okay, so you think they're going to take the tank route this season and do it again, tank it up, get a really great shiny draft pick, and then come back hard? Because I think they're going to be semi-competitive for the year and then fade. So I think they're going to be one of those pesky teams, the pesky Jazz, the pesky upstart Jazz. I reckon they'll flash their things. Walker Kessler, at the end of last season had his unleashing. If they put him together and play him properly against Lauri, John Collins is in town. They've got the same guard cast pretty much around. I don't see them being too dissimilar from last year. And we've got to remember when they were tanking down the stretch there, Lauri wasn't playing. So you could have dripped in a couple more wins here and there. They were quite comfortable being over that, flirting almost with 40 wins at a point. I just see them if it's 36 or 37, if it's the exact same carbon copy of last season, I wouldn't be surprised. If you tell me that they were 37-45 at the end of the season last year in April, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. That checks out. That's about them. But you're going unders. All right, we'll make a side wager on this one. Malley, thanks very much, brother.
My pleasure. Always happy to join in and have a conversation with you, Matty.
And talking about people who are happy to have a conversation, if you ever want to talk banks, talk to our good friend Ryan at Astute Newstead, who can give you confidential lending assistance with no obligations attached. Don't get pigeonholed into one lender. Ryan specializes in residential home loans with over 50 lenders on panel, including the major banks. And the best part, our mate, he does no charge like other brokers. Astute Newstead offers personal, vehicle, and business loans. So reach out to Ryan at Astute Newstead on 0431 766 784 or email ryanh@eganwealth.com and use code INSIGHT to let him know that we've sent you. Because if you've ever wondered what is the best bank, if your current interest rates are too high or if your dream home is affordable, he can give you the answers you need. Guys, Matty, thanks so much for us, brother. You have a good one. We'll crack a chat soon.
Easy, mate. Heroes.
See you, Hooper.